matter what you do and no matter how you do it, God is not going to change how much he loves you because it is out of his character to do so.
Crying out to you in our brokenness for the things that are wrong in our own lives, for the things that are wrong in the world.
Welcome back to Crete Conversations. My name is Matt. This is Pastor Adam. And we're here today talking about a conversation that I'm going to feel called out on every step of the way because I really like to talk a lot. And this is a very challenging subject for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking about solitude and what that means as a practice of the Christian life.
Yes.
Yeah. So solitude, I mean, we see it practiced in Jesus' life, right? There's lots of times where Jesus is going off by himself. I mean, he spends 40 days kind of in preparation for his public ministry out in the wilderness by himself, right? And then there's lots of other times where Jesus is going off by himself, kind of separating from his disciples, separating himself from the crowds, and just communing with God. So, it's something that we see practiced in Jesus' own life, right?
Right. And I mean, John Mark Comer talks about it. Richard Foster talks about it. And I mean, they say roughly same things. One of the things I really appreciate about Richard Foster and what he says is it's not about whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, and it's not about the crowds around you versus the silence. It's about how you deal with both. Like there are some people that have been given a gift of solitude. So being given a gift of being able to listen well and just sit there and just hear and listen, and either for God's voice or listen to other people's stories and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think. So for me, I guess I've thought of solitude as a practice, and it's something that we can all do. There are some people who are extroverts and introverts, and so maybe some people that are more introverted can deal with that solitude in maybe different ways. Although introverted doesn't mean that we don't like to be around people. It's whether it does it fuel us, does it drain us? How do we interact? And so some people might find solitude easier, but it's a practice, it's a habit that's probably important for all of us. Right. And it's a spiritual practice that has some pretty ancient roots. I think in your newsletter you're going to share some information and some references to the Desert Fathers, who were people. We're talking like the late 200s, 300s, after the life of Jesus, but still very early on in the church's history. And around this time, there was a lot of starting to be a lot of wealth and opulence in the Roman Empire, and some of that is kind of creeping into the church. And so these were people who kind of saw all this decadent living, this feasting, people surrounding themselves with lots of material wealth, and they thought, well, our Savior Jesus, lived kind of in this backwater town, removed from a lot of that. Jesus completely emptied himself of, all of, we've got like the Philippians, Christ passage hymn that, Jesus emptied himself of all of what he could have had as, completely divine, royal, all of that. And he humbled himself, taking on the life of a servant, dying a death on a cross of all things, right? And so these people looked at the decadence around them and wanted to separate themselves. So they go out into the deserts, especially of like North Africa, into Egypt, and they are kind of completely separating themselves out. And at first it's just a few people that kind of go out into the wilderness, and then there's like kind of this massive surge of people that are trying to distance themselves from the empire of Rome and pursue a spirituality that was kind of separated from wealth, separated from status. At least that's how it starts, right?
Right. And I mean, there are books about these people. Long books. But the quote that we're talking about slightly is from Abba Antony or Father Anthony.
Yeah.
It says, just as fish die if they stay too long out of water, so the monks who loiter outside their cells or pass their time with men of the world lose the intensity of inner peace. Now, there's a word in there that might confuse people or freak people out, and it says spend too long outside of their cells. He's not talking about like a jail cell. These are cells of which they take time and space away from the world to commune with the Father. And...
Well, literally in like the monasteries, their cells were their rooms. It was another room for, they're living in like a dorm situation, and rather than calling it their dorm room, it was their cell. Right.
But I guess my point is it doesn't look like your average like room.
Sure.
It's very different. From what I understand, it was very minimalistic, which is cool and is the point. Yeah. I feel like that the brethren themselves could relate a lot to the Desert Fathers as well. They were very anti-violence. There's even a few, one of them specifically, St. Moses, is like his whole story is just, he used to be a thief, then he found Christ, and then he went to a monastery, learned all about him. And like his whole pinnacle moment is one day he's walking in the desert and he gets jumped by the same group of thieves, beats them all up, feels incredibly horrible and convicted about it, takes them all back, and then proceeds to disciple them and help them learn who Christ is, which is wild when you think of it. That one, not only did you defend yourself against like 4 or 5 people that jumped you, you then proceeded to carry all of them back to your monastery and then preach the gospel to all of them, which I think is an incredible story.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say, though they are Eastern Orthodoxy or Orthodoxy as a whole, they're not, restricted to just that.
Yeah,
their practices are very beautiful.
Well, for sure. You said, in this, nonviolent angle that they were like kind of the early Anabaptists. I would say the other way that they were very much like the early Anabaptists was, the Desert Fathers and then Mothers were leaving, the opulence of Rome in the 200s, 300s. But then later in like the 1500s, we see another surge of, a lot of like decadence in the church, lots of cathedrals, like the clergy are the ones making bank. Like they're making a lot of money, and they're walking around with a lot of prestige. They're walking around with a lot of wealth. And, one of the things that the Anabaptists kind of resisted was this materialism that had crept into the church and specifically into the clergy. And they were pushing back against that. And so there was definitely a push against nonconformity, which is kind of like, they didn't want to be like everything else in the society around them, but also a push towards a much more simplistic way of living. And so maybe the solitude wasn't necessarily a part of that for the Anabaptists. I mean, they were very communal in the way that they expressed their life. But there was kind of this pushback against the material wealth and status that was around them. They share a lot of that in common.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happened with the Desert Fathers and Mothers is like, unfortunately, they started to take pride in the, like how extreme can we get with our solitude?
Yeah,
and it stopped becoming about me separating myself for a time to focus on God, and it was like, how much punishment can I put my body through to more or less gain favor with God? And that's kind of where things go off the deep end, and for sure, that can
That's just mysticism at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah. So we can learn from the positive sides of, going in and being in solitude, which is just about devoting time away from the distractions of people and events and things that are going on to focus on our life, our walk with Christ, right? So that's what we're talking about here. It was interesting just today getting ready for this this conversation. I came across it's a Harvard business professor of all things who was talking about the necessity of boredom, and I was like, boredom.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yes.
this is wild. And I'm watching through this video, and it's Dr. Arthur Brooks talking about it. And he's done some research with a colleague in the psychology department, and they were looking at the importance of boredom and boredom as a time of resetting your mind, resetting your imagination, and your thinking patterns, because you stop trying to distract yourself with screens, with just filling the time mindlessly. Like, it's good to just have times where you sit and you're bored. I didn't know that, like, as a kid, over the summer, I would come to my parents and say, I'm so bored. What can I do? What can I do? But like in that time, and my parents were like, we don't know. You figure it out. Go outside and be a kid. Mm-hmm. And we were forced to use our imaginations, and we used it in some very constructive ways, and maybe some other ways. But it forced us to use our imagination and to grow as people in that boredom. I'm not sure that my parents necessarily saw that as like our spiritual formation, but like, kudos to my parents for not just filling that time with junk. Flash forward to today, we still continue to struggle with boredom, and actually our society is finding ways to reduce boredom. But what we're finding is that people are still struggling with relationships. We're struggling with purpose. And that's one of the things that Dr. Brooks talks about is, when we're bored, we start to think about, what's the meaning of life? What's my purpose in life? What things make me genuinely happy? And like, so he's talking about this in this video, and I'm like, these are all like spiritual formation questions. Like, what is our purpose? What are we doing here? And when we just fill our lives with stuff, with screens, with social media, with like just packing our schedule full of stuff, and we never take time to just be by ourselves, we don't stop to really ponder those deeper questions. And it was interesting. He references a psychology colleague who was doing some research on how we deal with boredom. And in this study, they put people in a room for 15 minutes with no phones, no screens, no distractions on the wall. It was just like a blank room, except for a button. And what the button did was, if you push the button, it gave the person a low-level electric shock. I mean, low level. And rather than these people sitting there and being bored, they were pushing the button. So they would rather experience like low level of pain. And he said it was, it was the vast majority of people that would rather experience the low level of pain than deal with boredom. And I'm like, oh my word. And on one hand, I go, that sounds ridiculous. And on the other hand, I'm like, I might be the person in there pushing the button just to give myself something to do.
Yeah.
Like, because we do tend to pull out our phone and we distract ourselves. And so on one hand, I say, solitude is a practice that goes back, to the Anabaptists, to the desert fathers and mothers, to Jesus himself. And it's a practice that we have largely lost in our world. And we're walking around miserable. Like the people, their level of anxiety, depression, all of that, and we're afraid that boredom is going to like amplify those things. And maybe being bored for a time, and let's take it past just being bored, to being quiet and being in solitude with God, with Christ, is maybe one of the things that breaks these cycles of anxiety and depression that we so experience. And the busyness isn't helping us. It's not helping our frame of mind. It's not helping us think through the large questions of life and faith and all of that. And so we really need those times to just be with God and clear ourselves of the distractions. And so Dr. Brooks talks about, he uses the phrase, be bored more.
Yeah.
You know, which I was like, that's awesome. I don't know if I can do it, but it sounds great. And then he was talking about 15 minutes a day of boredom. Mm-hmm. And again, you know, like I would say, go, you know, as followers of Jesus, let's go beyond I'm just going to sit here for 15 minutes by myself and realize that I'm sitting here for 15 minutes with the Spirit, you know, with Christ. And what's the Spirit saying to me about my purpose, about the big questions of life, about the grief that I'm experiencing, about the joy that I'm experiencing, all of that. So, I think we've totally lost this practice of solitude. Yeah.
I mean, I had a college professor in freshman, sophomore year, I won't go through how weird my grades were at the time because I was a very special case in college, we'll put it that way. But our one professor who taught like our connections class our freshman year, pretty much explained like his morning routine because part of our connections class was learning how to do college life. And so part of learning how to do college life, like we literally got graded on designing a morning routine. And so one of the things that he said was that he spends 30 minutes in silence each morning. And the amount of people that raised their hand and said, I could do that. And he goes, okay, I challenge you with 5 minutes. 5 minutes in the morning, wake up, silence, don't do anything.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that came back to class and went, I couldn't do it. Because 5 minutes I was one of those kids that like, I didn't challenge him, but when he said 5 minutes, I was like, I want to try that. Yeah. I feel like I could do it. I can't do it. Like I can, obviously, but it was so hard for me to just sit there and be like, okay, let me just, oh, wait, what about this? I was thinking about this the other day. Oh, like, oh, I got to get the dishes done, or oh, I got to take the trash out, or I had to pack my lunch, or like all the crazy stuff in the world. Whereas instead I could just sit there on a couch and just think about Christ.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, all these spiritual disciplines that we learn about and all these spiritual practices we talk about start with solitude.
Yeah, I was just thinking of, we've talked about, silence, we've talked about like meditation. We've talked about some of these practices that where does silence and solitude stop? Where do they overlap? Where does meditating on Scripture, where does that fall with solitude? And for sure, there's overlap, and I don't think there's lots of ways of practicing solitude. Whether that is praying for people in your life, but you're going to spend that time just with God. You're going to clear yourself of the distractions. You're going to turn the phone off or, leave the phone away, turn it on silence and flip it over and just ignore it. The solitude part is just really taking time to separate yourself from people. Not that the people are bad. There's going to be time for you to come back with community, and community is super important. But I think one of the ways that we can appreciate community even more is by also taking that time away from community and being in just you and Christ. Yeah, for sure, the Anabaptists would also say, hey, like community is super important for how we understand God, and absolutely, and we'll get to that as like practices and how we do that too. But I think practice of solitude can kind of help heighten our experience of community in positive ways when we come back together. Yeah.
Yeah.
So solitude, something that we could do, like it can be like part of your morning routine, right? It could be, people look at me kind of strange sometimes when I practice. And please, I don't do this like, this is not every time.
Right.
But like there are occasions where I turn the radio off.
Yep. Yeah.
And you just drive wherever you're going, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, your commute to work or whatever. Some of you have maybe more of a commute than others. But just turn off the music, turn off the distraction, and just be there. And it is amazing in that time, like, how, I have some of the best thoughts and some of the best insights and some of, the most creative times that I've experienced have come when I just turn the distractions off and I'm just thinking there.
Right.
And I'm just, what the thoughts that come to mind, they come to mind, process them, Jesus, what are you telling me in this moment? Holy Spirit, guide me. Yeah, just enjoying that time.
And I think part of it too is part of solitude is also just learning to listen as a whole, learning the passage in James, it talks about be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. It is the only part that we should be quick with is listening.
I had a professor that said, 2 ears, 1 mouth. That's supposed to be like a ratio.
Right, right. And so like it could even be when you're with a person. I oftentimes think back to the amount of times I've had either conversations with my fiance or I've listened in on conversations between my parents, and the phrase I hear the most that I should really take to heart is, I don't want you to fix it, I just want you to listen. And it's the real thought that, oh wait, no, like listening is the action. Listening is like that is how I help this person, whether like whoever it may be, because sometimes like they don't want us to speak, they don't want us to get angry, they just want us to listen. I had a situation this past weekend. Wedding planning is a stressful time and filled with the joys of almost losing your friendships over every little thing that is chaos. Not actually, but still, it's chaos. And there was something that happened between both boundary breaking and also adding on to just not listening to another person that was involved, that I kind of like stepped in and basically was like, hey, the buck stops here. Like, we're done. We can't do this anymore. Not saying we can't be friends, but like, I understand that you want to love this project, but you got to step back. To which I didn't have the full context of the story. I had zero context of the situation. I just knew that I was angry at this person at the time, and I stepped in and I enacted the wrath that I thought was right, which was not in any way, shape, or form correct. And I had to apologize to the person next day, and I talked to them and I said, hey, you're right. I was wrong. I should have trusted you, and how I reacted to you showed very little trust, and I'm sorry. And like, but that all could have been avoided. That whole conversation, I'm not going to say it was painful, but it was, I mean, it took a lot of guts to swallow my pride and to say that, because it's just like, I didn't want to apologize to this person, but I knew it was right. But it all could have been avoided if I just shut my mouth and I listened. And so solitude isn't just spending time alone with God. It's learning to listen better. Because the better that you can listen to people, how much more can you listen to God? In fact, we're called to listen to people. We're called to hear their concerns and burdens. Anyway, but I mean, some people, when I say some people have a natural gift of solitude and they have a natural gift of being able to listen to others, like some people are really good, like therapists have a natural gift to sit there and hear the concerns and burdens. Whereas I think people that are gifted into like public speaking have a harder time to just, yup, I hear what you're saying. Totally get it. And I can only imagine, because I'm not in a pastoral position, but I can only imagine how strange it is to have to do almost both, because part of your job is to hear and listen to the people's concerns, and the other part of your job is to talk and, really like explain the gospel to people in an approachable and not, I wouldn't say, because the Bible isn't always the most friendly book in the world when you read it, but an approachable and an understandable way. So like, I don't know how would you approach a solitude, like an act of solitude in a position where you have to listen and speak as a regular, like that is what, like that is part of your job.
Well, I find for myself, the solitude is leaving. At times for me, the solitude is leaving both of those behind, to say, I don't need to speak in this moment, and there will be time for me to come back and listen to the concerns and the struggles of others. And I need to do that out of a place of solitude. So I need to come to that. So yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the listening aspect. And for sure, sometimes there's a Holy Spirit, help me now, prayer that I, may not verbalize, but it's something that goes through my mind when somebody's maybe sharing, struggles that they're dealing with, or, just issues that they're going through. Help me to listen, and help me to articulate the best that I can, your love for them in the midst of this. I'm not a counseling's not my not necessarily my gift, but we do learn, I think, just as any follower of Jesus, to try and listen, and try and to express love. But again, all of that connection with people, I found it really important to have, lots of time. And I guess the longer I've spent in ministry, when I got started, I was like, well, I was fresh out of college, and this is how I do youth ministry, and you've got to get to these events, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and we've got programming, and we've got this, and I got to teach this lesson, and I've got Sunday morning responsibilities, and all of that, and it was just like a lot of go kind of feeling. But the longer I've been in it, the more I realize, like, if I don't have those times of solitude, silence, contemplative prayer, like those kinds of things, like I'm no good, because I can't keep going. I can't keep pouring out if I'm not filled up, right? So for me, it's tough to be bored. I don't like that feeling either. I am too quick to pull out my phone and be like, oh, let's check the news, let's check scores, let's check, what cousin whatever's putting out on social media. I'm too quick to do that. I have to build in rhythms, and I have to protect times of solitude. I rarely come to a point in my schedule that I'm like, oh, hey, look, nothing to do. Yeah. Let's just go do solitude. Like, that's not how it happens most of the time. If that happens, suddenly you have a moment free. I'm like, naps sound good. So I have to kind of build that in. For me, it is my morning routine, and it is maybe moments of driving somewhere that I turn the radio off. For me, I won't say this happens every day, but like today, about 10 minutes that I went out to the prayer labyrinth at the church and just walked around. I leave my phone in the office. That's just time for me to think and pray and be myself for the most part.
Yeah.
So it's good. And that's, I think, as we talk about like how-tos, practical things for, people that are watching, for our own congregation. When we say the word solitude, I think probably a lot of people are like, nope. or maybe in the best, it's like, how do I even get started with this?
Right.
And I do want to emphasize, we are not the desert fathers.
No.
So a lifetime of moving into the desert and being by myself, maybe that sounds good to you. I don't know. Part of me is like, that sounds interesting. I think I could handle it for like a short amount of time, and then I would just be...
Yep. I'd lose my mind.
Yeah. So we're not talking about that. What we are talking about is like, just start very practically and small. Like 5 minutes. Set aside 5 minutes. Turn the phone off. Leave the phone in another room and just go be by yourself and God. One drive, pick a morning commute or afternoon, evening, or whenever you're going home. Pick one of those. Hey, it'd be great. 15 minutes a day, some people like to go to the gym and they want to spend, 20, 30 minutes in the gym running on the treadmill or elliptical or, lifting weights or whatever. Like we want to put that time in for our physical bodies. Mm-hmm. Like what about our spiritual bodies, which we're all connected. The guy, Dr. Brooks from Harvard said, hey, go, as far as the boredom thing, go be on the treadmill without listening to music and without a podcast. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I could do that.
Yep.
But so there's opportunities. I think this question comes up a lot with any kind of self-sacrificial acts, which solitude is one for most of us. Right? We sacrifice for the things that that are important to us. Whether that's, family, friends, if your career is important to you, you sacrifice things. Maybe that means moving or, whatever. If your physical health is important to you, maybe you sacrifice eating all of the sweets, or you sacrifice, time to go work out in the gym or whatever. If our relationship with Christ is important to us, then sacrificing some time with people, with our phones, which we're way too connected to just be by ourselves and God. Like, in the grand scheme of things, that seems like a pretty small sacrifice. Just, 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. Maybe you go longer. Maybe it's like, once a month you want to spend like an afternoon in solitude with God.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. I don't think, like the desert fathers and mothers, again, they kind of got caught up in like the how often and how extreme can we make this? And I don't think God was like, oh man, they spent 24 hours in solitude, like kudos to them, and like let's give them an extra crown in heaven or whatever. Like I don't think that's how it works.
Right.
I think for our own relationship with God, spending that time, committing ourselves, building that habit into our lives. I just think for our spiritual lives, for our relationship with God, for our mental health, for our physical health, taking time to just relax and like decompress and, allow our heart rate to kind of come down and not be so driven. I just think there's so much good that can come out of taking some time with solitude.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You got any other practical tips for us, Matt?
Not that I can think of, but you should totally read Celebration of Discipline with Richard Foster. It's not sponsored. It's a great book, though.
Yeah, we've got it. You've referenced a number of resources. Celebration of Discipline, which is Richard Foster's book, talks a lot about solitude. Dallas Willard, of course, talks a lot about solitude. More recently, we've been kind of interacting a little bit with John Mark Comer, who talks about solitude.
Through practicing the way.
Yeah. There's lots of other books written by people that are just trying to practice solitude. And so there's lots of resources, but again, it doesn't have to be like rocket science.
No, I mean, if anything, you and I have talked about this a little bit. It's the spiritual disciplines are more so like a practical discipleship, like practical, tangible ways to help other people grow.
Yeah.
They're not the ones that are doing they're not the ones that are like forcing the growing. God is allowing the growing to happen. And so, this is not like a mysticism thing.
It's not, right. Like 5 minutes of solitude, 15 minutes of solitude, 24 hours of solitude, like that's not earning you grace. It's not earning you, anything. But hey, look, it's time that you get to spend with your Savior Jesus.
Exactly. And that's the important
time.
part.
Yeah. And I think just, especially in our rushing world, solitude and, Harvard business professor calls it boredom. I want to say, take the next step. This is really a practice of solitude and being with God. So I hope we get opportunities. I think some of the best writing is just from people that are practicing these things and sharing their experiences. Because I don't know that I've ever regretted being by myself with God.
No, never.
Yeah. So hopefully other people that are connecting with this can get some of those experiences too. So hope that you get to take some time and be by yourself and God, drive in the car, whatever, in the morning, cup of coffee and God. It works.
Yeah.
So
anyways, we love you. We'll see you next time.
All right.
If you want to read ahead and be little overachievers, it's service that's next. So
okay.
Have fun.
All right. Sounds good. Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Matt from the present. I wanted to say hello, happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, or Merry Christmas. I wanted to come on here and talk about Christmas in the next 4 weeks that we have. Instead of our monthly schedule and having something that comes out each month, we're going to be having a weekly schedule where we're going to release something each week. And instead of a 30 to 40 minute video format, we're going to be dropping it down to 10 to 20, usually averaging somewhere between that 15-minute mark and the 20-minute mark. And these are going to still be spiritual disciplines in ways, but at the same time talking about how we can apply it during this Christmas season. So we're going to be looking at servitude or community or generosity and all these different areas. We look forward to bringing this content to you and helping all of you understand, as well as us, how to apply these spiritual disciplines to our lives. That's what I got to say. Ignore the Matt from the past lying to you, saying that servitude was next. It may be, it may not be. I have no idea yet. We're slowly planning that all out. But until then, happy Thanksgiving and soon to be a Merry Christmas. We love you all. We'll talk to you soon. And get in your word. Spend time with Christ. He's what matters the most.